So we're just running a few minutes late. We're going to go to like 3:05, 3:10. Hope that's okay with folks. Just remind you there is an evaluation. Afterwards, some people have already asked about it. We do have a new exhibit in our visitor center, so if folks want to see the new exhibit, Donna Ware, who is our executive director, will lead you on a personalized tour using all the techniques we've learned through today. And then Karen, who's the videographer, will be in our museum tour because you're here. We want to sell things to you. But we'll give you a 10% discount as well. So just to let you know that that's all happening. Now back to Dan.
Okay. So people don't come into your site with a big sign on top of their head that says, I'm interested in this, I'm interested in that. So you really have to try and elicit the answer and find out a response in some way. And this is a beginning way to do it. Does somebody have an example that they came from their site they'd be willing to share?
I have different questions that I ask different groups, so whatever comes first. And one of mine is, when I'm at Solid Plantation, have you ever been to Solid before?
Uh-huh.
And of course they say, no, it's great, I can tell you anything I want. And if they say, yes, I was here 10 years ago, forget it. It's all changed. And this is why we changed it and how we changed it. And so we give an insight into that.
Okay.
And that way it gives me an idea of what how familiar they are with the site. We have a lot of transit people come to our place and they're for a one-shot deal. And so most of them, they say they're from California, and I say, that's great, that's better across the road.
All right, so hold on to that thought because the next question we're going to talk about in a second is then how do you begin kind of mining that to get a little more information you can help tailor things. Does someone else have something?
I often ask, I tell people why I'm there, and then I ask, and why are you here? What brings you to Solderly? And one of the toughest sells I got was a very bored person who said, well, my company gave me a free ticket, and my mother made me bring her. Which told me a lot. It was just these two people that told me a lot, and that was, I think, the quickest I've ever been through my tour. And I knew immediately they didn't want all the little details and information. They just pretty much wanted to walk through.
Okay.
Tell us what they can sit in the corner, be quiet.
How about one more? Someone else over here have? Or maybe you just tell us what you're talking about.
Yeah, I thought like it's like asking why they're here, but also maybe asking like, oh, are you? Because we work at an aviation museum, so we do a lot with science and history, and so I'm asking like, oh, are you here from more like the science angle, or are you here from more the history angle? Because I think it gives them more of a concrete idea like what they should be looking for while they're walking around the museum.
So those are two combinations of good things, finding out whether they've been there before. So then you can, address things that have changed or they might have seen, and then trying to dig a little deeper and find out what some of their interests are about it. And these questions will sort of vary, but kind of the goal of doing this again is to try and begin to get a handle on what their interests might be, because then you can start moving the tour a little bit in that direction. Otherwise, you run the risk of just doing the straight, here it is, and the same tour you give to everyone. And at least give you some kind of flexibility there. Does anyone else have an example that they think's good in terms of kind of digging out some of that information?
I do adult tours and kids tours, and we do archaeology here at Birmingham. So in either case, I'll ask, have you done archaeology before? If they say no, I would say, kids, do you know what it is? And we go from there. If they say a little bit, I'd say, well, what kinds of tools did you use, and is that what a professional archaeologist would use? And if they say yes, a lot, and sometimes even school groups have done like a whole section on it, then I'd say, well, what time period were you working with? History. And then you say, well, this time period was. So.
Yeah, that's good. It's trying to dig out some information about your visitors, find out a little bit more about them. So again, you can structure, you can tailor. I don't know if any of you who've read The Experience Economy by Joseph Tynes. Talks about sort of the economy of today in many ways set up to try and give people experiences that are tailored to their interests, and there are many ways that happens. But this is one of those examples. Go to the next one. So these are some things to think about. These are actually good questions maybe to get together if you've got some other people on your staff. You don't need to do this right now. But it can help you figure out, as you're determining their interests, well, what points of interest seem to attract the most interest from people who come to your sites. So if you can kind of begin getting that information, then you can guide them there, whether or not, especially if the time is limited, but not even if just the time is limited. Anything your organization is doing in particular right now that might be of interest? It's like here where you've got a big going on, I mean, there's always kind of new things happening there. So try and give them some of those things that are going on, that are current, that are vibrant, that are recent, that might be weather related to the community. So these are good things to actually go through with some of the docent, staff, interpreters, and kind of get some almost boilerplate kind of questions and directions so you can give people based on what their interests might be. I've often recommended that sites that I work with, as people come into the visitor center and have their first encounter with the person who's selling tickets, that person actually try and get some of that information too. Because then they can find out if they're interested in a certain topic, a certain subject, they can say, well, why don't you go here first? Now, that's not quite the same if you're in a situation where you're giving a guided tour, where they don't have the flexibility to go to different locations. But if you do have exhibitions, and they do have the option of an exhibition or two and a guided tour, or walking here, walking through the gardens, if you can get that information, you can send them to where they want to go first and get them to experience that. And it's a small, but potentially potent way of reading your visitors and getting more information. Always go ahead and go with this. So I want to talk just a little bit about objects. This, in a sense, is following from some things we did this morning with some kind of time period specific objects. Would you like to be my guest again?
Okay.
So this is, now, before I go further, let me show you one thing here. This DVD called Opening Doors was produced through an IMLS grant that also is funding this conference at Conner Prairie. It's 2 DVDs. One is a series of conversations with Conner Prairie staff. Lynn Dierking, who was working for Learning Innovation at that time, and Roy Underhill, who is the, what's his TV show called? Woodwright Shaw. I think it's the longest running show on TV. And Roy's just a really great interpreter. So it has all their comments, and then it has specific interpretive techniques, and it has examples, it has bad examples. And then the other disc has some of these exercises here that we have right here. So it's really a really good thing, and you can get it at Conner Prairie. You may have to call their bookstore, but I will also, I think I'll have the email list from everybody here. I'll send that information to you. I'm not giving out handouts, I'm trying to minimize paper, so everything I mentioned here, I'm going to send you in electronic form, so you'll get a copy of it. Also, if there's anything I mentioned that you specifically want to get, let me know, and I'll be sure to get a copy of it, because I have tons and tons of articles I have on this kind of research. I'm more than happy to share it. All right, so, guest.
What is this?
What do you think it is? What's it made of?
Well, it's wood.
That's right. Do you see the hole running up the middle? Why do you think it might have that?
Are you supposed to pour something through it?
That's a good guess, but what can go through that hole without us having to put anything in it?
Well, I can see through it.
Yes, light can come through, so you can see something through it. What other sense could you use to get information through that hole to you?
Well, you can't really touch through there, and you said not to put anything through it, so you can't use a sense of taste. Could you hear through it?
That's right. So let's suppose that you put that small end up against your ear, the wide end against something you want to listen to. Can you think of anyone who puts something like that up to his or her ear to listen to something at the other end?
A doctor does that.
That's exactly right. It's an early form of a stethoscope the doctors would use to listen to your heart or chest. Sort of an example of a leading, you're kind of leading the visitor on to help them look at something. All right, let's look at something else. Now, I'd like to try this, and what I'm going to do is at each table, I'm going to give one person a description of what this is. And then I want that person to try and get the other people at the table, who are the visitors to the site, to try and figure out what that object is. It was a little bit of a guided conversation.
Could you describe describe it? It's hard to see what that top part is. Could you?
Is that water at the top or? a
This
hole?
is about 5.5 inches in diameter.
Uh-huh.
That's a hole in the top, and that's a hole right there, and it's ceramic. Yeah. Holes are connected. So I'm gonna pass this out, and, who'd like to be table?
Anyone else? Anyone else want to be?
Go for it. Did you get one here? Who wants to be the interpreter here?
So, my understanding is you're supposed to get them to understand what that is.
So your goal is to try and help the other visitors who don't really know what this is, but you do. Help them figure it out, and they're to ask questions based on what they know. The size, the hole, yeah. All right.
Actually, use the question.